The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us once again. It is Music Weekly once again, as we do each and every Sunday night, generally, with the exceptional schedule change here and there. But we are here to talk all things rock and metal for another Sunday night, and we're going to be looking at the music of November the 1st. And it was an interesting week. Not maybe as deep a music pool to choose from this week, but we were still able to find some good stuff, so we'll share that with you coming up a little bit later on in the podcast. Joining me, as always, in the studio, the guy who puts all this together, it's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, man, we are down to the final 2 months of the year for music. And yeah, to your point, it was an interesting week. A lot of really borderline stuff that I wanted to run with, but just none of those obvious choices, which I feel like I've been really lucky lately with finding. Took a little extra work this time around.
Yeah, it wasn't there weren't as many of the slam dunk choices this week that we've had. And again, I think as we do this podcast, we've done this now for 40 weeks. I don't know that we've really found a pattern yet of how releases necessarily come out, if there is a certain time of the month or whatever it may be, that a lot of these companies that we look at tend to push their biggest releases. But this falling on the first of the month, I don't know if that had some bearing on maybe the quality or quantity of things that were released, but like I said, we did find some really good stuff. We'll share that with you in the second part of today's program. Chris in the chat, as always. A big thanks to our newest follower. We are up to 26 followers on Twitch now. We're still shooting for 50 somewhere down the road and obviously beyond, but we're taking it a little bit at a time, but we will get there. And a big thanks to everybody who checks us out, whether it's live or on the VOD, twitch.tv/nerdcastempire. A few news stories to talk about off the top. And the first one was just interesting. It was based off a podcast on Talk is Jericho, because Chris Jericho just is everywhere. This is an interview with Van Halen drummer Alex Van Halen talking about his memoir, Brothers, which obviously talking about the passing of his brother, Eddie Van Halen. And the article's very much in depth. I'll paste it into the chat because there's a lot of topics covered, and certainly if you're a fan of Van Halen, it's certainly not only worth a read, their transcription, but probably worth going back and checking out Jericho's podcast to get kind of the full context of everything. But the interesting note, which is what made the headline here, was Alex Van Halen saying there is, quote, probably 3 or 4 records worth of unreleased Eddie Van Halen music. And that seems kind of strange, at least on the face of it, that you have all of this stuff that's just been sitting around on a recording somewhere in a vault or on a reel-to-reel or in a digital form, and they've never done anything with it. Now, obviously, as a band that has had its ups and downs, and that certainly probably contributed to some of this stuff not getting out, but it's really interesting to me to think that you could end up having a bunch of music from someone who's passed away get released after their death. And we've seen it in the past. It's not unusual, but it's always kind of strange where it's like, oh, now we're going to do something with all this stuff that we've just been sitting on for all these years. It's just kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious. I don't know, as far as the average guitarist, how much stuff they have sitting around that they've recorded or messed with and just never really acted on. I feel like that was always kind of a thing with Metallica, where they talked about, James has like this stash of just endless riffs somewhere. So, that maybe that's not completely insane. But the other thing to me is like, well, of course he has a lot of music saved up. They've only released one studio album since 1998. That was 2012's A Different Kind of Truth, which I didn't really listen much to. I just remember not being a huge fan of that first single, Tattoo, with David Lee Roth singing. It didn't really do a whole lot for me. And, they didn't release anything else after that. So why wouldn't there be a crazy amount of music stockpiled?
And like you said, maybe it is common. I mean, you're right. You point out the stuff with Metallica, and I guess, is that a conversation we're going to have however many years from now after James Hetfield passed away? They're going to be like, oh, we have 10 albums worth of Metallica we can release, and we're going to release that. Because to me, and we talk about this all the time, the joy of music as a fan is most often seeing it live. And you're never going to get to see Eddie Van Halen play this stuff live. Like, even if they make the best albums you can possibly make from this stuff, somebody else is going to be playing this music because he's not here to play it anymore. And I mean, it is, in one sense, a nice tribute, I guess, to everything he's done in the industry to make sure that everything he's done sees the light of day. But at the same time, it also brings kind of a sadness. Like, man, it would have been really cool for him to get a chance to show everybody this stuff instead of having to see it after he's gone.
Yeah, I think at the very least, what you'd like to see, and kind of the article later on as you read it gets into kind of the relationships that Alex has with the prior members of Van Halen. You'd kind of like to see him and Wolfgang kind of get together with some of the old members, maybe even bring in like Nuno Bettencourt, who is obviously like
could do everything.
A child of Eddie Van Halen in terms of guitar virtuosity. Get them together, maybe do some sort of tribute album or something to that effect.
Yeah, I guess I could see that being a good way to handle it, and that way you do get a chance to release this stuff. I think it'll be interesting to see how you end up writing it into music, because obviously it's not like these are songs necessarily. These are riffs and parts of songs, and so you got to figure out who's going to write it, how they're going to put it together. Like you said, maybe the best bet is to create kind of a tribute band of people like that are either directly or indirectly tied with Van Halen, and have them kind of go through the material and pick out the best stuff and put it all together, and then you can do it as a tribute to him. Maybe that's the best plan, or maybe they just talk about it in these podcasts and they never ever get released.
That's certainly possible too. I mean, I imagine there still has to come a point where Alex is ready to revisit that, because clearly, this is something he's still struggling with. But yeah, you kind of hope as a fan, you get more after all of this. Like, something positive can come from all this.
Yeah, I would agree. So we'll see how that is. And again, check out the article. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. Also, check out the podcast, Talk is Jericho, with the full interview so you can get all the context. But just an interesting note that was noted in Blabbermouth this week. A couple of small stories to kind of finish up our news segment. And this was something that we actually noticed on WWE programming, and now somebody else has noticed it and written an article about it. The note that Kerry King has been brought in to basically rework, or the headline says heavied up.
It's an industry term.
Yes. Damian Priest's intro song. Of course, Damian Priest, one of the kind of rising young stars in WWE, young relative to...
young in WWE.
Yeah, not young overall, but certainly someone who's new to the WWE scene over the past 5 or 6 years, and has now kind of taken his place in the main event scene for WWE, and he's gone through several theme songs as he's bounced around in groups and things like that. And it was notable a couple of weeks ago that his music had changed and had definitely gotten harder. And then a note came on the screen that said, Kerry King was involved with this. To me, there's a couple sides to it. Number one, if you're a WWE fan, there's been a lot of consternation about their theme songs over the past 15 years, probably at least 10 years. So this maybe is a sign that they're going to, even if they're not going to use directly licensed music that's already existing, that they're going to bring in musicians to kind of spice up some of this music or contribute to something new. And it's a chance to kind of say that Priest maybe is about to get another big push, because generally when somebody gets a new theme song, that pretty much means that they're getting pushed back to the main event scene, and it's probably about time for that for him. But, it's cool to see, because, Kerry King, obviously really good, and certainly Damian Priest is someone we really like, and even back to his Punishment Martinez days. But kind of an interesting story here.
Yeah, and it's really one of the areas that WWE still needs to continue to evolve. It's weird considering you have someone like Paul Levesque, who was in such a high position in the company, who is synonymous with using Motorhead for his music. Like, clearly he understands the value of bringing in an established act to kind of enhance the talent as far as what you're hearing when they're walking down to the ring. I was kind of curious, just kind of looking more into it, like, because obviously Damian Priest, big metal guy, so it's kind of cool to see him mention bands like Trivium and In Flames as far as being on his workout playlist. And obviously the usage of Kerry King here, not surprising. Priest is obviously a Slayer fan. He's, his finishing move has been South of Heaven for how many years? Like, that's just...
At least since Cody came back to WWE.
Yeah, well, I mean, he kind of reverted back to South of Heaven after using the Cody move there for a while. But, I want to see more of this.
Yeah, and I think, I'm guessing we will. WWE certainly appears to maybe be going in this direction. I don't think you're going to see the Tony Khan method of just writing a 7 or 8 figure check for some 80s song that, I don't understand, or 90s song more recently. But I think bringing artists in, having them kind of collaborate with superstars and create something new or fix something that's already there, I think is more likely. You'll still see licensed music for events. We just saw that, War Pigs again being used for, the upcoming Survivor Series War Games premium live event, which hopefully we'll have a post show on. We'll have to check our schedules, but I'm hoping we'll be able to do that coming up in a couple of weeks. But really good news, and certainly Damian Priest, again, one of our favorites. So great to see him getting an updated theme song. This last story is a little strange, and that's why I like to have these little ones that are a little bit different at the end of this. So, the story that Anthrax's Scott Ian as an action figure. In fact, it is basically him from 1987. It is going to ship in May 2025. Pre-orders are available. This is interesting to me because I just didn't see that there was necessarily a market for something like this, but as you're going to probably tell us all, there is, as it turns out. But Anthrax is awesome. Scott Ian, kind of felt like even before I knew Anthrax, I knew Scott Ian from all of his contributions on MTV or VH1 programming, but just kind of cool to see, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recall years ago, I think it was like Todd McFarlane Toys. They had the Metallica figures that were supposed to be a big deal. In the article, he kind of mentions that there were previous figures of him that now are going for a lot of money. I checked eBay, and I know like the NECA toys do tend to kind of become expensive. I didn't really see any metal band figures going for a lot of money, but I honestly had no idea that there was such a market for this. Looking at his store, the pre-order for his 1987 figure is $125. So if that's something you're really into, that's there for you. You could also spend $180 on the NECA website and buy the Beetlejuice Ultimate Trench Coat with Spikes and Dante's Inferno Room Deluxe set, which, iconic moment from the Beetlejuice movie from 1988.
Yeah.
Maybe that's more your thing, but yeah, being into anime, obviously I know figures in that realm are a huge business. I didn't know that also extended to metal music.
I didn't either, but I'm definitely curious to see if this is a growing trend, because I feel like so many of these trends that I didn't think were a thing in the last year have become a thing, like releasing things on cassette or vinyl. Obviously vinyl we've known about, but cassette was kind of a shocker that people were bringing that back somehow. But action figures, I guess, why not?
If people aren't paying for the music anymore, where are you going to make your money?
And, there's something to be said for that, hey, there's a way to diversify. Let's go the KISS method. Let's license everything and see what sticks, and whatever doesn't work, we can not sell it anymore. But, why not? If you're trying to make your 3/1000th of a cent off a Spotify stream, or you want to buy an action figure or get an action figure sold, why not? So Scott Ian's cool. Anthrax is cool. Really like them. So cool. Good for them. Hopefully it goes really well. So definitely an interesting one to wrap up our news segment this week. Just a reminder, check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to previous episodes of the Nerdcast Empire. Of course, most of the recent episodes I think since we've been doing this music podcast, at least are on our YouTube page as well. And usually for about 30 days, you can see the archives on Twitch as well before Twitch bounces them off. We've got 2 podcasts again this week, back for Anime Thursdays on Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. I don't know what we're doing this week. We'll figure something out. We've got a few days to do that as my schedule starts to normalize a little bit, but we'll be back Thursday at 7. And then next week, another episode of Music Weekly, November the 8th, the music we will talk about next week. So make sure you join us for that. With that said, it is time to get around to the new music of this week. Of course, each and every week, Mike goes through several different sources and basically puts together a list of the best music of the new release of that given week. In this case, it is November the 1st, and he will put a song from each of those releases on a playlist, which I will post in the chat in just a moment. And then once he does that, we go through and pick 2 of the new releases to spotlight on this podcast. Of course, I always encourage you to check out Mike's playlist because there's anywhere between 50 and over 100 in some of these recent weeks songs on there. So there could be something you like that maybe doesn't really catch our eye or our ear. You can pick your own 2 or 3 or 10 songs off the list every week as well. So definitely check that out each and every week. And a reminder, if you're listening on the podcast version on your favorite podcast source, you won't get the audio clips of the songs. You'll have to be here live, if you're hearing it out live, or catch us on the VODs on YouTube or Twitch to hear the songs. Or again, go to Mike's playlist. You can catch all the music there, including the bands that we will pick. Having said that, it is time to get to this week's picks. And again, an interesting week because there was some good stuff. Obviously, we're going to tell you about 4 of the things that we thought were good this week, but it was kind of a shallow pool this week of really good stuff. So it was a little more challenging to find our 4, but we were able to do that. And Mike, you will kick us off. What do you got for us first?
Yeah, it's difficult when you basically have a week to fall in love with the new music that comes out. Sometimes I'll hear one song off an album and I'm like immediately sold. Like, this is it. This is the band. I'm going to listen to the whole thing. I love the whole thing. And that's not always the case, though. Sometimes you need 3 or 4 listens to really kind of like let something grow on you, and we don't always have that luxury.
And sometimes, depending on what song ends up on the playlist, might not necessarily represent the whole album.
I've had to dig sometimes when there's a song where I'm like, man, I probably shouldn't have picked that one because I kind of picked them blindly. And then when I go for my listen, it's like, oh, I picked the intro track that's instrumental and probably not a fair indication of what this band sounds like. So let's search them a little deeper. But like last week, the band One Morning Left. Like the second I heard that, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I have to get more of this. This week, I feel like I kind of settled into a couple just sure things that they aren't breaking the mold necessarily, but the sound that they're going for, they nail, and I think that's why they didn't jump out at me, but the more I listened to them, I certainly grew to enjoy them more. That being said, for the first band, we are going to Germany with the speed and thrash metal band. It's their second full-length album. They are Spitfire, and the album is Trinity.
Yeah, of the bands on the list, this is definitely one that you know exactly what you're getting into when you start listening to this, but they do it so well that, again, I don't have any problem with not every band needs to create something new or do something revolutionary. Sometimes it's just a matter of doing the thing you want to do and doing it really well, and that's how you get picked for this podcast. And I think these guys, honestly, the 4 bands we picked kind of all fall into that category this week.
With that. Yeah, I'm a big fan of bands that kind of carry the flag for new wave of traditional heavy metal music, and these guys are definitely that. They formed sometime before 2014 as the band Stormblade, according to the Metal Archives. Then ran as Spitfire from 2014 to 2018. Had a couple-year hiatus, then jumped back into it in 2021. Since then, they've released 2 singles and 2 full-length albums, this being the second one since their reformation. The band consists of Thunder Mon on drums, Rico Stockel on guitars and vocals, Simon Moak on bass, and Daniel Bowles on guitars. The page for this album, from their label, Witch's Brew, their Bandcamp, cites the influences for this band being, quote, bands of old like Overkill, Motorhead, Exciter, and some classic Metallica. And that couldn't be more true. That is, if this band was straight out of that early thrash period, you'd totally not think twice about it. That being said, they don't feel dated. They still feel fresh for the times. It doesn't feel like a retread by any means. I'm a big fan of cool intro tracks or cool openings to the first song, which is kind of a hallmark of metal bands from that era. And this album nails it with the track Destroyer of Worlds, featuring a Robert Oppenheimer quote, which is just kind of a wild way to get your album started. Standout tracks on this album include Trinity, Downfall of Existence, Pointless Ways, Mankind into Dust, and the track we're going to listen to, the track Bending Reality.
So let's check this out. It is Spitfire's new release, Trinity. This is the third track off of that album. It is Bending Reality. So let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Close your eyes. Think about what you will be. Just respect dice. Bending the reality. Close your eyes. Think about what you will be. Just respect dice. Bending the reality.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's exactly what you sold that it was going to be. Like,
Yeah.
they pretty much nailed it. I even kind of got a little bit of Anthrax vibe off of that. It definitely have that kind of that screaming, that shouting, not screaming.
A bit of like a hardcore influence there, which is kind of Anthrax's thing.
Yeah, for sure.
With that track, and the reason I picked it is that riff after the chorus leading into the solo was just so awesome. There's no other way to put it. Like, it sold me. I'm like, okay, if I want to pick one track to sample, it's got to be this one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And again, if you're a fan of that type of music, I think you're going to enjoy this whole album. But definitely check out Spitfire's new release, Mike's first pick for this week. As always, you have 2 picks for us. What do you have for pick number 2?
Yeah, so I feel like for a few weeks now, I've been hyping up the metal scene in Finland. They've kind of been nailing it. Some of my favorite bands are from Finland, and this band definitely could be on the radar. They're a new band. We'll see where they go from here. But this is the first album from the Finnish melodic metal band, released through their label Napalm Records. The band is Arctis, and this is their self-titled album, Arctis.
Yeah, a really, really cool release from these guys. Really excited to kind of see how they develop from here on out.
Yeah, so this band consists of Alva Sandstrom on vocals, Michael Mikander on guitar, Bjorn Johansson on guitar, Mats Odal on bass, and Mika Paninen on drums. Band definitely has some modern metal elements to it, mixed in with some pop, some European melodic metal, electronica, but all of them in a reasonable enough dose where it won't alienate you to hear them. Like, if you're not necessarily into the electronic elements, I think there's still enough metal where it's going to keep you interested. Reading some of the reviews on this, people were kind of talking about this band like they came out of nowhere. Had a very small following, no albums released yet, and then out of nowhere they're signed to Napalm Records and are opening for Apocalyptica. After listening to the album, though, I feel like they have the songs and the sound to do well on a big stage. Like, I don't think it would feel weird hearing them live opening for a major act. Standout tracks on the album include I'll Give You Hell, Remedy, Fire, Children of the Night, When the Lights Go Out, and the song that I picked to listen to tonight, Tell Me Why.
So check these guys out. This is the self-titled from Arctis. This is the 4th track off of that album, Tell Me Why. So let's listen to a little bit of that now. Oh, it just decided it was going to go back to the beginning. So let's figure that out, why it decided to do that. So we'll get that queued back up here real quick.
Minute 53.
That was kind of weird. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
I didn't even have it open that time. Last week it was causing all kinds of crazy things. All right, let's try that again. Yeah, it's again, they really like this sound. Really enjoyed the song that was on the playlist, and I haven't had the chance to listen to the whole album yet, but I have a feeling I'm going to really enjoy it. I mean, it's like you said, it's hard, but you also have kind of a little bit of a different element to it that kind of balances it out. It's not just all hard driving guitars and stuff. It's definitely got that well-rounded sound that so many of these bands from Europe seem to have mastered.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the easier listens this week when I did sit down to listen to full albums. Obviously, same could be said for Spitfire, where nothing really felt abrasive about it. It was just nice quality listening throughout.
Yeah, I think that's honestly when we have to listen to so many albums, that's kind of what we're looking for. We want something that isn't going to drive us to immediately try to turn it off midway through the album. But no, this is really good. Looking forward to getting to hear the whole album. But that is Arctis with their self-titled. Definitely worth checking out. Mike's second pick of the week. I have two picks as well this week, and we are going to another one of our favorite countries for pick number one. We are headed to Italy. This band is the alternative progressive metal group from Italy called Klogr. It is Klogr. That is a weird name, I know. We'll explain what that is. This is their album Fractured Realities. It is named after a psychophysical law, S equals K log R, which has to do with like stimulus and how it is affected in the brain. So definitely that's why it's pronounced Klogr. Founded in 2011. They've been through some lineup changes over the years, but this is their fourth full-length album, but it's their first one since 2017. This is a band that's got some elements of atmospheric rock, but not as much as some of the bands that we listen to, that it's almost so airy that you can't really get into it. It's got a great heavy prog metal sound. There were even some tracks, and I think maybe the track we've chosen will be one of these as well, that I got a little bit of a Disturbed influence from it as well. But overall, again, pretty easy listen, and definitely what they've chosen to do, I feel like they really did it well. Standout tracks include Early Wounds, 1 of 8, Hysterical Blindness, and the track we're going to listen to, which is Face the Unknown. So let's check this out from Klogr. This is Fractured Realities, the fourth track, Face the Unknown. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, I mean, again, what they've chosen to do, I think they've done really well. It was just a really solid listen front to back in this album. I really enjoyed it. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, you can definitely hear kind of the David Draymond in his voice to a certain degree. I dig this. I think it feels kind of like a more modern interpretation of maybe that early 2000s nu metal stuff that was going on. We'll be anxious to dig further into that one.
Yeah, Klogr, definitely a little bit different sound, but definitely enjoyed that one. Check that out this week. The second pick is a little different. It is AOR, which is typically not different for my picks, but it is almost like a southern rock AOR, I guess. Like it is definitely a sound that comes from a different decade, maybe like the 80s or early 90s. But it does have a little bit of a kind of a southern sound to it. This is the band Rimbacher with High Hopes on the Rocks. This is their debut album from this AOR / melodic rock / southern rock band from Finland. So we're going back to Finland once again. It's got a mix of AOR sound, and again, just that southern rock and some of the tracks that just kind of jumps out at you. Band is named after the singer Nico Rimbacher. It is definitely different than some of the AOR tracks and albums we've had, but they do have very catchy songs, so it definitely falls into that AOR category. It's 40 minutes for 10 songs, so it's going to fly by pretty quickly, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. It went really quickly front to back and was a really good, easy listen. Standout tracks include Loving You, If Is Loving a Broken, Rock to Ruin, Out for More, and World Killer, which is a song we're going to check out on the podcast. So let's check out Rimbacher with the album High Hopes on the Rocks. This is the opening track to that album, World Killer. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. YouTube music just has a mind of its own sometimes, but yeah, again, it is AOR in that it's very catchy, but it is, like I said, there's something a little different there about this group that definitely made it jump out, especially that opening track, which I felt like was kind of the most, like I said, I don't know if it's Southern or just some sort of bluesy metal or something, I'm not sure, but it definitely has a different vibe to it, but I did really enjoy this. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it had something a little different where some AOR just kind of feels like they've added a guitar to what could be soft rock or adult contemporary music. This still feels rooted in rock, I think. Also kind of strange. The song felt so happy for a song called World Killer.
Yes.
I thought that was a little peculiar. But yeah, this is definitely one of the stronger entries this week.
Yeah, this was definitely interesting, but worth checking out. The debut album from Rimbacher. Definitely encourage you to check that out this week. So that's our new music for November the 1st. We're going to get to the vault each week. Mike and I will give you a couple of classic albums to check out. Mike is continuing through the list of the best glam bands from A to Z that are listed on Wikipedia. He's gone through the alphabet and almost halfway done again, like the second trip through the alphabet. We're up to the letter M this week, and probably a lot of great choices for the letter M, but what do you have for us?
Yeah, letter M was decent. There were a few obvious ones that I stayed away from. Motley Crue, Mr. Big, Yngwie Malmsteen. That being said, there was the group I picked was a band that I was somewhat familiar with, but maybe not this iteration of them. In that case, the band being the McAuley Schenker group. I was aware, I knew they existed, obviously, but I own a CD from the Michael Schenker group, a remaster of their 1981 MSG album, which is peculiar, too, because McAuley Schenker group also has an album called MSG, which is totally different. But that being said, the album that I picked for this week is the 1989 second McAuley Schenker group album. It is Save Yourself.
Yeah, I just had the chance to listen to this all the way through earlier today, and this is great stuff. Obviously, there's a couple of big tracks on here that I think fans of music from that time will definitely recognize. But yeah, Michael Schenker's got to figure something out with his naming system, because it definitely makes it a bit of a challenge when you're looking up MSG, because you got two different MSGs with two different MSG albums. It becomes a challenge, but these guys obviously are really good.
Yeah, I was thoroughly impressed with this album. Just a little background on it. The group began as the Michael Schenker group after Schenker left UFO in 1979. They released 4 albums under that name initially, with Gary Barden on vocals, those being the Michael Schenker group, MSG, Assault Attack, and Built to Destroy. In 1986, Robin McAuley was brought in initially to replace Barden on vocals in the Michael Schenker group, but evidently once they started working together, they determined that it should be more of a partnership. Thus, the McAuley Schenker group was born. And not surprising, when you look at the Save Yourself album, Robin McAuley has more writing credits on it than Schenker does. Not by a lot, but clearly this guy was more than an equal partner in what they were doing. I mentioned I knew of MSG more so from their 1981 album MSG. Tremendous album for the time. Had songs on it like Attack of the Mad Axeman, On and On, Let Sleeping Dogs Lie, Never Trust a Stranger. Definitely something I'd recommend. Moving back to McAuley Schenker group. They went their separate ways in 1996, reunited in 2012 for some live shows, and judging by Wikipedia, it appears that Robin McAuley is listed presently as the singer for the Michael Schenker group. If you look at the dates of his involvement, clearly they just get together every so often and do some work together, but obviously when you have another band that clearly he and Michael Schenker are both still super active, it's always good to see that, this isn't something that was a product of its time and just disappeared afterwards. The album is pretty much what I expected, just radio-friendly hard rock in the vein of something like UFO or the rest of Schenker's work. I was previously aware of the song Anytime, which is probably the best song on the album. That being said, there are other standout tracks, including Save Yourself, Get Down to Business, Shadow of the Night, Destiny, and Take Me Back. The whole album is solid top to bottom and definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, just adding on to what Mike said, again, it's just it feels like an album that should have had like 5 or 6 hit songs on the radio because, for a rock album, this really could not be any more radio friendly.
Yeah.
If they tried, like it was really good. And no surprise, you had Frank Filippetti producing and mixing it and Ted Jensen mastering it. Of course, Filippetti involved with a ton of big artists like Foreigner and Survivor and Carly Simon, Barbra Streisand, George Michael, the list goes on, Billy Joel, and Ted Jensen worked with everybody, literally. Including he did Hotel California for the Eagles. Like,
wow.
Dude's obviously a legend. So again, you had good people behind this. Clearly they had high hopes for it. And the fact that it only peaked at number 92 on the Billboard 200 may have been a little disappointing to the record label because, again, they clearly threw a lot into this. And it really, by all rights, should have been higher. It's a really good album. It's polished. It's got a great sound. It holds up well from something from 1989. And if you're a fan of that type of music, I mean, you should find all their stuff, whether it's Michael Schenker Group or McAuley Schenker Group.
Or UFO.
Or
whoever.
Definitely worth checking out because this is a really good album, top to bottom.
Yeah, I was definitely excited with this pick this week.
Yeah, really good one. So definitely check that out. That's Save Yourself from McAuley Schenker Group for the vault pick for the letter M. My vault pick, as we've talked about each and every week, we started many, many weeks ago, basically trying to pick an album every year. I went all the way back to 1969 with Chicago Transit Authority, the debut album for the band that would eventually become Chicago. And we've gone all the way through the 70s and 80s and 90s. We are into the 2000s now, this year being 2004. And while I had one album that I will declare my vault pick, just to try to not have multiple vault picks, there will be 3 albums that we'll spotlight just because they're all really, really good. But let's get to the honorable mentions before we get to the spotlight albums. Contraband, the Red Velvet Revolver album came out, included Set Me Free, Slither, Fall to Pieces, Dirty Little Thing. Out to Every Nation, which was the 3rd album by Yorn, because we love Yorn, and we have to spotlight that for sure. Tak Matsumoto Group released their first studio album in 2004, Tak Matsumoto Group TMG1. Obviously, a collaboration between Eric Martin and Jack Blades, and obviously Tak Matsumoto. If you're a fan of any of those those guys, you need to check that out. Really good stuff. The System Has Failed from Megadeth. Great album. I know Mike will probably have more to say about that, but good stuff there for sure. But the 3 albums I want to spotlight, and we'll get to the first 2, and then we'll get to my pick. Reckoning Night from Sonata Arctica. I just picked Sonata Arctica as my vault pick, so I didn't want to pick them again, but I love this album. It's so good. Misplaced, Blinded No More, Ain't Your Fairy Tale, Reckoning Day, Reckoning Night, Don't Say a Word, The Boy Who Wanted to Be a Real Puppet, My Celine, Wildfire, White Pearl, Black Oceans, Shaman Dali, Wrecking the Spear, and Jam is the hidden track. This is great. I love this album. Listen to it all the time. Just really good stuff. And then a Japanese album that honestly, any other year might have been the pick just because this was so important to me getting more into Japanese rock music in the early 2000s. And this was Smile from L'Arc-en-Ciel. It was really one of the first Japanese rock albums that I remember seeing released in the United States.
It's the first one I've ever owned.
Yes, for sure. And it's a great album. Everybody's going to know Ready, Steady, Go. It was the song from Full Metal Alchemist. It was the only opening theme used over here on the American release of the show on TV. So it was everywhere. But this whole album is good. You start off with Kuchizuke, Loverboy, Feeling Fine, Time Goes On, Coming Closer, AN, Revelation, Hitomi no Junin, Spirit Dreams Inside, which was used for what was the Final Fantasy movie, I think.
Spirits Within, I think.
Spirits Within. And then they had, I believe you're correct. And then multiple versions of Ready, Steady, Go, which included each instrument and singer taken out of the song for some reason. But reached number 2 on the Oricon charts. But again, it was huge over here. And I think it was one of the albums that certainly got me into L'Arc-en-Ciel more so than I was already. But definitely worth mentioning. But I had to choose this one, Hellfire Club, the album from Edguy, released in 2004. We've already talked about how much I really like Edguy, but this album is, again, right up there as far as albums that got me through working some of the crappiest jobs I've ever had. Starts off with Mysteria, and then The Piper Never Dies is such a great long song. Like, it's hard to write a 10-minute song like that really is just great from beginning to end, and they did that. We Don't Need a Hero, Down to the Devil, King of Fools, great song, Forever, Under the Moon, Lavatory Love Machine, I've mentioned on this podcast before, Rise of the Morning Glory, Lucifer in Love, Navigator, that's a great one as well, The Spirit Will Remain, Children of Steel, Mysteria, and Heavenward. What can I say about those guys? That's an amazing album, and if you've gotten into music on this podcast, I can't encourage you strongly enough to pick that album up and listen to it beginning to end, because it is just really, really good. So those 3 at the top were kind of the big ones for me this year. Before we get to the ones I've missed, Mike, your thoughts on those 3 specifically?
Yeah, pointing out first that Smile from L'Arc-en-Ciel was my vault pick back on the April 26th music episode when I went through the alphabet on the letter L.
There you go.
Tremendous album. I think at that point in time, to me, I remember that, and I remember TM Revolution's Seventh Heaven as like the 2 big, wow, they carry these CDs at Suncoast. I'm going to buy them. So important as far as is cultivating that love for Japanese rock music. Can't speak highly enough about that. The other 2, it's interesting when you think of Sonata Arctica's Reckoning Night and Edguy's Hellfire Club, is they both kind of have this weird transition feel to them as far as what the band's sounds were and where they were going. When I think of Reckoning Night, I just think this is kind of that first big step away from the Ecliptica, Silence, Winter Hearts Guild sound into more what would become modern Sonata Arctica. And kind of the same for Edguy. There are clear power metal tracks on this. You mentioned Piper Never Dies, obviously. Very, very power metal-ish. But then you have a song like Lavatory Love Machine, which to me is just the prototype of what Edguy would become in the future. I think...
like party rock almost.
Yeah, more or less. And I think you had this album followed by the Superheroes EP the next year, and then Rocket Ride in 2006. And by the time you get to Rocket Ride, they're more of a just melodic hard rock band. You think of tracks like Superheroes, obviously, Catch of the Century, Trinidad, Air Force One, Fucking with Fire. These are just melodic hard rock.
Yeah.
And that's
a great album.
Oh, it really is. It's a tremendous album, but I kind of feel like Hellfire Club is kind of the beginning of that turn toward what would eventually become modern Edguy.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's, something that they probably realized, both bands, that if they wanted a little more mainstream success, they were probably going to have to sacrifice some of their roots, and it was going to irritate some of their hardcore fans that they started out with. But I think, it's hard to argue with the success they've each had. I mean, clearly it worked. And again, you mentioned Rocket Ride. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks when we get to 2006. But, I mean, that's just catchy songs, one right after the other, basically. And I'm sure, not that any of this music did great in the States, but I'm sure in Europe, it probably did do better on a mainstream level than some of the early stuff from Edguy. So
I would imagine so. And even the desire for greater commercial success aside, I think there's only so many times you can kind of have that same sound album over album until eventually, even if it's not because we want to sell more, I'm in a different place. I'm not the 18-year-old kid who had been writing music a certain way and feeling a certain way. You know, you get older, your mindset and your influences change, and it's only natural. I mean, every band goes through it to some degree, with the exception of maybe AC/DC. Like, you're going to have a little bit of, if not growth, at the very least change.
We'll get to Tenets of Sanctus in a couple of years after that, and that's another really great album. But again, definitely a different sound, and I think even farther maybe that direction. But yeah, you know, Edguy, Sonata Arctica, they're almost always going to be at or near the top of my list when we're getting into this era of music, as we kind of bring my first run through the vault to a close in a few weeks. But there was a lot of great stuff in 2004, and what was interesting to me is there was another. It felt like, as I was scrolling through the list on Wikipedia, that there were more albums this year, and I don't know if that was just like I didn't go through and count, so I have no idea if that's it. Just was a feeling, and I don't know if we're getting to the point in 2004 where it was starting to become easier to release albums as things became more digital and those tools became more pervasive. That maybe we're starting to see more album releases as we get into the mid-2000s. But it felt to me like there were a lot of albums in 2004. So I'm sure I missed stuff. And so obviously I tried to keep my list to a little bit smaller selection. So what else do you have on your list for 2004?
I wonder, too, if as we're entering more of the digital age now, if just the records of these albums being released each year just become more readily available, or they're not... You know, in 1964, they're probably digging the bottom of the barrel to try to remember what all was out there, especially when you have Wikipedia, who isn't plugged into record labels to just directly get the information. You know, someone's editing this.
That's true.
So I don't know. I mean, it could certainly be the case that there just were more albums released, or maybe that information is just more out there now. It's funny, the amount of albums that I wanted to point out is not increasing.
Yes.
There may be more music each year from here on out, but I'm scrolling a lot more thinking, oh yeah, that one.
Yeah.
But it's funny from a historical perspective, because it's like every next year there's that band or two or three that you're like, oh, they were still releasing music? Huh, that's crazy. Where clearly we've now gone past so many bands' wheelhouses, their classic eras, where, you know, maybe 10 years ago on the vault, it was, oh, that hair band was still releasing stuff. Now we're like, you have the hair band, you have, you know, the post grunge stuff, the grunge stuff, the, you know, new metal bands, the emo bands, where you're like, oh, that's not. Oh, I guess they're still putting out music after that one that had all the hits on it. That's crazy.
Well, and some of those bands, kind of like we've talked about the last couple of years, they were starting to go on these like tours of bands of that era that were like, you know, 4 or 5 bands of X era, whether it was hair bands, whether it was not 80s or 90s bands. So then it kind of sparked a lot of these bands to get back in the studio and release more music, thinking, hey, people are coming to see us. Maybe they want to hear more from us. And in most cases, that wasn't the case.
Probably not. But yeah, that being said, some of the ones that I pointed out, which there were some big albums for me from this year for sure. Starting early in the year with the Rasmus's Dead Letters album. I remember they had a video actually on MTV for the song In the Shadows. I thought, it's different. Let me check it out. Really cool album, just kind of melodic rock, nothing outlandish, but just really enjoyable to listen to. We have Clutch's Blast Tyrant. Really cool, kind of doomy hard rock. Songs like Prophets of Doom, The Mob Goes Wild, Cypress Grove. Killswitch Engage, The End of Heartache. First album with Howard Jones on vocals. Songs like Rosa Sharon, The End of Heartache, obviously. Slipknot's Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses. Duality, Vermilion's Part 1 and 2. And Before I Forget, great album. You know, somewhat local band. Hawthorne Heights released their debut album, The Silence in Black and White. Definitely one of the big emo-ish bands that came out around that time. Tracks like Nicky FM and Ohio is for Lovers. One of my favorite albums from the year, Bad Religion, Empire Strikes First.
I missed that.
Yeah, that
is a great album. I must have just scrolled past it when I was scrolling through.
Yeah, amazing album and proof that even though you may disagree with the lyrics and the lyrical content of a band, if they rock, they rock, and that has always been Bad Religion to me. I love this band.
Yeah, for sure.
On that album, you have just classics: Sinister Rouge, All There Is, Los Angeles is Burning, Empire Strikes First. Just great album, top to bottom.
I would have chosen that one. I just missed it, evidently.
Yeah, let's see. Make sure I'm not losing my mind here. I'm pretty sure I'm not.
Like I said, when you keep scrolling through Wikipedia, sometimes you just zone out and miss it.
Let's see. Released June 8th, 2004.
Yeah, sure enough.
Song Social Suicide appears in the video game Tony Hawk's Project 8 and MX vs. ATV Untamed.
Huh.
As it should have. Angra's Temple of Shadows. Another band that I wish I'd been into at that point in time. Kind of was a late arrival on them. Tracks like Spread Your Fire, Angels and Demons, Waiting Silence, Temple of Hate. Just great power metal band. So you mentioned Sonata Arctica, obviously. Annihilator, great Canadian thrash metal band. They had their album All For You. His first album featuring Dave Padden on vocals, and the second with Mike Mangini on drums, which I didn't even realize he drummed for Annihilator. Not on consecutive albums, really, though. He was on this album, and then back in 1993, he was on the Set the World Afire, or Set the World on Fire album. But just, they're always solid. Just great riffs there from, what's his face, whose name I totally forgot, unfortunately. Let's see. Jeff Waters, yeah. Great guitarist. But songs like All For You, Dr. Psycho, Demon Dance, The One, Nightmare Factory. Couple more. We have Guar's War Party. Pretty much the first album that I was aware of when it came out as far as being a fan of Guar. I kind of got into them right before this one came out with Violence Has Arrived and obviously some of their classic older albums like Scumdogs of the Universe. This one, though, just typical Guar. Tracks like Bring Back the Bomb, Womb with a View, Decay of Grandeur, and War Party. Definitely worth listening to. And finally, just kind of an interesting one. Anthrax's The Greater of Two Evils came out.
Yeah.
This was a compilation of classic Anthrax hits, re-recorded with John Bush on vocals. A lot of those songs were originally sung by Joey Belladonna, who, oddly enough, would be back in Anthrax like a year later. So really cool to hear a new take on some of their stuff. I like both vocalists, so you can't go wrong either way.
Just an awkward situation. It's like, you spend all this time and effort into having him re-record all this stuff, and then a year later you've got your old guy back, and it's like, why did we even do this?
That was a weird one anyway, because he came back, and then like a year or two later, it was like they didn't really want him back anymore, and then they brought in a couple other guys. Anthrax's relationship with Joey Belladonna seems to have been really complicated over the years.
Yeah, I'm glad we've got to see them with him singing, obviously, because the dude can still sing.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Like I've said before, they're the one band in the two out of the four in the big four that probably has the two best singers.
Yeah, for sure. I think because of that, they're kind of underrated because I feel like everybody looks at them as number 4 of the big four. And I'm sure by some metric or many metrics, that's probably the truth. But, like, I enjoyed their concert. I mean, Megadeth still, like, as far as having seen them, the best one. But Anthrax was definitely right there. Like, I really enjoyed their music.
Yeah, I mean, all four bands kind of bring something different to the table that you can derive some enjoyment out of seeing them live. But yeah, as far as just vocal prowess goes, it's hard to beat Anthrax.
Yeah, and that's probably why, because I tend to, as we do these podcasts every week, I tend to kind of gravitate toward the bands that have the strong vocals, and they absolutely do for sure. But yeah, a lot of good stuff. Like I said, I missed the Bad Religion one. I think I even thought to go back and look and make sure I didn't miss one from them. But anyway, like, a lot of really interesting stuff in 2004, and we're going to continue on through the 2000s until we get to 2009. Then we're going to move to a different vault gimmick, if you will. But That is going to take us to the end of this podcast for another Sunday night. Great to have everybody along with us once again for another episode of Music Weekly. A lot of really good stuff. Again, don't forget to check out Mike's playlist. It'll have all the music from November the 1st. See if you find something. If you find something you like, let us know. Reach out to us. We'd definitely like to hear what you have chosen. We're continuing to work to bring more people into our Discord. We'll continue to kind of update that and figure out how to get more people in there so people can communicate with us directly after these episodes to let us know what you think, and again, kind of share your music taste as well, because the more people that have input, the better off it is. It's great to get people's opinions on the music we talk about each and every Sunday night. Again, we'll be back on Thursday for another episode of Anime Thursdays. We'll figure out what we're going to do before then, but it'll be 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Thursday night. And then next week, another episode of Music Week with the music of November the 8th will be on tap next Sunday night. That's going to wrap things up. Big thanks to Chris for holding down the chat. Big thanks to Snowflake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to Mike for putting all this together. And big thanks to you, the listener, wherever you're catching us. We appreciate you catching us here on the Nerdcast Empire. That's going to wrap things up for the entire crew. I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.